There we go. Okay, so let me just share my screen. So I have about 20 minutes of a quick update on the project that I can give you, and then I'm happy to take questions unless you have something uh, that you want to get start with before I go over anything that you want to touch on before I start. Nope. Okay, I'll just share my screen then, and happy to. You can stop me as well if you have any questions as I'm going through it. I'm happy to take questions throughout. So this is a 4-year project that we were funded to undertake by Accessibility Standards Canada. So we're about at the halfway point at this time into this project. The goal of the project was to create a set of recommendations for safely securing, loading, and unloading mobility devices during air travel. And at this stage, I'd say I think we're starting to get, even though we're only halfway into the project, I think we have a good sense of the types of recommendations that we're moving towards. And I don't think any of them will come as a big surprise to either of you through IATA. Like I think through the guidance documents that I've read that IATA has put out, I think a lot of the known issues are the same issues that we're dealing with that are coming up. And I think we can come up with recommendations that are a little bit more refined beyond what is in current guidance documents. So I'll just take you through what I'm thinking there. For this project, we have basically 6 different activities that we've undertaken to try to gather this set of recommendations to come up with an updated version of recommendations. Um, and the first part of that was I'll take you through each of those 6 tasks. The first was doing an environmental scan and scoping review. We started with about 600 documents. We narrowed down to about 57 important documents that include the guidance documents that IATA has put out and other standards bodies have put out, regulatory bodies, as well as the literature, the academic literature on this topic. So we've kind of, as a starting point, we wanted to make sure we were very clear on what was already out there so that we could build on those pieces of information. This is a great example of the type of guidance that I'm sure you're familiar with that IATA has put out in their guidance. So, guidelines around avoiding tipping and laying mobility aids on their side is to be avoided. So this is an example of where it's supposed to be avoided. We have some airlines that have actually their rules state that they will never lay a device on its side. Wheelchair manufacturers say you should actually never put a wheelchair on its side. Our recommendations will probably come in with a statement that says you should never put a wheelchair on its side, but I don't think that would come as much of not a big change to the way that you're doing things. Keeping another one that's, I think we've talked a lot about is keeping wheelchairs upright, pretty much the same idea. Keeping wheelchairs upright on their wheels is the way we should be transporting devices. The way we do strapping, the current ways that we strap things, again, there's a lot of good guidance out there, but I think we can do a little bit better. Our testing, we've done some simulation testing with this type of strap as well as some other strapping methods, and I'll show you where, I think the open question here is how tight is tight enough, right? And how do we make sure that we're not over tightening? How do we make sure that that person that's putting this wheelchair in place is not over tightening? We have some suggestions on how we can revise the guidance on this for those types of things. Um, how do we get wheelchairs onto the belts that are used to load and unload? We know that there's the difference between wide body aircraft where wheelchairs will typically go into a container, but if it's going into a narrow body um, aircraft, then it would need to go up one of these belt loaders. The issue with the belt loader is that the belt is it's usually just wide enough to fit a wheelchair on it. But the weight of a wheelchair, especially a powered wheelchair, can cause the wheels to sink into the in between the rollers on the belt. It makes it very easy for a wheelchair to start to want to turn and potentially get caught up and fall off the edge. And that's when we get the catastrophic damage to wheelchairs. Our We have some suggestions on ways that we can revise how we deal with belt loaders. Um, I mentioned, yeah, the challenges. I'm sure both of you are well aware of the challenges of working in the narrow body aircraft, the ergonomic challenges combined with the fact that this is a 350, 400-pound device that someone has to be bent over while they're putting this in place and strapping it down is probably one of the key challenges that we're dealing with. The doors to the cargo spaces are often obstructed. Those are all key issues that we know about already. Um, Getting the wheelchairs up onto the belt loader, if you're talking about a narrow body aircraft, how do we do that? There's good guidance on using some sort of lift or ramp type device that many airlines already do to some extent. Making those a requirement is one of the things that we would likely push for in our recommendations. The challenge, of course, is that many airports, especially in Canada, we have many smaller regional airports that are very, very small. They have very little infrastructure, and how to practically make these recommendations, to have airlines follow these recommendations in our more remote areas in a place like Canada is one of the challenges I think that we're hoping to learn more from our airlines and our airport partners that we're working on in this project. I'm happy to get any feedback that you have today on what you think we could do. Um, One of the big things we did was try to get as much exposure to these tasks of loading, unloading, and securing these wheelchairs as possible. We did tours of a number of airports here in Canada, and we watched the process from the start to end. We brought our own power wheelchairs with us to the airport and had great, actually, really, we were welcomed. Uh, their teams were very interested in having us come and have us watch the process for loading and unloading these devices. This is one airline who's asked to remain anonymous here, so I've blurred out faces and things. But their policy is that you should never run the belt loader. This is a motorized device that would normally, if you're having suitcases, you turn it on and it would raise the suitcases and put them into the cargo area. Their policy is to never run a belt loader when you have a wheelchair sitting on the belt loader because of this risk of the wheels sinking in between rollers and potentially slipping off the sides. So they require really two people to push. I mean, I think this is one of the things that was the biggest learning having gone and seen this process. These wheelchairs are very difficult to move when they're not being driven by the user. Even if you unlock the wheels, there's a lot of force that you have to overcome to get this wheelchair to move forward. If you take any electric motor and you try to spin it by hand, it has quite a bit of resistance. And so the people that have to move these wheelchairs around are fighting that resistance. So we have one idea on how we can um, overcome that in the future here, but that is one of the biggest challenges. Like one person alone probably could
Excuse me,
not. Oh, yeah.
can I ask?
Please, yes, go
This
ahead,
is
Linda.
just one airline.
We've done tours with at three airports
Hmm.
with two different airlines.
And three different airlines using the same criteria, right?
Not all using the same criteria. No, no.
Oh,
Some others. Hi, Sonia. Good to see you.
hi, Sonia.
Thanks for joining us. No, so they have different
Apology for
airlines
being
have
late,
different
sorry.
procedures. Yeah, different airlines. Sorry, I was just answering one of Linda's questions here, Sonia.
Hmm.
Different airlines have different airports and airlines. Each team at every airport, even within the same airline, I think we found can have different ways of going about this.
Because but I
Because they
think
have
it's
different access to infrastructure. And like I was saying, some of the smaller airports in Canada won't have the same infrastructure that a place like Toronto Pearson would, for example.
And
Uh,
wheelchairs are different as well. It's not only about infrastructures, it's also because wheelchairs are different. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
understood.
wheelchairs are also different, but I
Mm-hmm.
think the what we've done in our evaluations is we've
Mm-hmm.
brought our own wheelchair. So we've brought a power wheelchair and a manual wheelchair with
Mm-hmm.
us, and we've asked them, we've watched the process for
Okay.
how the loading process is done on the same types of wheelchairs. And actually, I would say the process for one given
Mm-hmm.
power wheelchair is likely similar to another
Mm-hmm.
power wheelchair. I don't think there would be much difference. They're all very heavy, 350 to 400 pound devices. I think the process they
Understood.
would use would be similar.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Um, yeah. So I think this really without two people pushing, I think one of the things we are going to measure in some of our simulation testing is just how much force does it take to push one of these wheelchairs up a ramp of an angle like this. And it is, I think from a workplace safety, I think there's a combined opportunity here to make this work safer for the people that do it. And, I think it would speed things up and make it safer for the wheelchairs as well. So yeah, so I'll take you through some of the recommendations we're going to have in a bit on those things. We watched as these devices were secured within the cargo areas. We took lots of video. We also brought a laser scanner with us and scanned the cargo spaces. And once we put the wheelchairs in place, we scanned the whole setup so that we were able to replicate this at our lab for our simulation testing, which I'll go into in a minute. But the one of the key recommendations that we're going to have, I mentioned about straps. I think the way these straps, the current strapping mechanisms that are used typically involve one long strap at the front of the wheelchair and one long strap at the back of the wheelchair. And they are typically wrapped around the caster arms at the front and back, and they run over what I haven't talked with manufacturers about this, but these are areas of the wheelchair that, as an engineer myself, I would not want to put the type of forces that these straps are placing on the wheelchair. And what's really obviously missing here is finding a way to utilize the existing tie down points that are available on most wheelchairs. So the method that's currently being used, using these long straps, does not give us an opportunity to make use of these tie down points that are, again, many wheelchairs would have. So our recommendations are going to be, some of them will point us towards trying to make use of those existing tie down points, which make it less likely that we cause damage to the plastic cladding that wraps a lot of these components here. This is plastic motor mounts and things that really are not designed for the types of forces that we're putting on them. And we've measured some of those forces, and I'll share with you what we've learned there. This is the L track. This is inside one of the containers. The L track adapters that are used. This is what those yellow straps, the ends of the yellow straps have a little adapter that clicks
I
into
doubt.
these adapters. What's really interesting is it's the same type of uh, track. This L track is also what's used in wheelchair vans and in on buses and subways if you're tying down a wheelchair, that makes use of the Q-straint system. So you may be familiar with the Q-straint system, which offers an interesting option for us. So we've done some testing as an alternative recommendation to go to something like this compared to the straps that are currently being used that you saw in the previous page. Two main benefits are, one, that there's a hook at the end of each of these Q-straint straps that are designed to go into those anchor points that are available. And two, they self-tighten, so that you can't over-tighten these. They're spring-loaded, so you pull it out, latch it on, and that's it. You don't have to make a decision about, is it tight enough or not. These have a locking mechanism that lock automatically. And to unlock them, you press this little yellow lever and it unlocks the device. So the over tightening issue, we'll talk about that more in a second here. I do want to mention that Qstraight also offers a solution for use with their retractable tie downs for devices that don't have the existing tie down points. They use a loop of material like what's shown in yellow here that you can adapt any wheelchair to be tied down using these types of tie downs. So that, I think it is an opportunity to improve the way these are done now. This is what our lab looks like in our basement here. This is a 6 meter by 6 meter simulation motion platform. It's actually the base of a flight simulator. And normally you would have a cockpit of an aircraft on top of here. We have a series of labs that we can swap on and off this base. One of these labs we've used for our testing. It's just an open space, 6 meters by 6 meters open space, and we've mocked it up to include these L-track components at the distances that we scanned inside some of these aircraft, and we've now tested most of these devices within so wheelchairs, scooters, and walkers. Tied down using different methods, both the methods that are currently being used as well as the Qstraight methods that I'm going to recommend, that I think our recommendations are going to lean towards. Our testing also included load cells that measure the tension that's being put on these straps when we simulate a flight. So the idea is that this motion simulator gives us we can input flight data into it so that it acts as if it puts the same forces and stresses during takeoff and turbulence and landing that you would experience that the wheelchair would experience while it's flying. So here's an example. Here's what it looks like. This is a video on the left is from our control room where we're looking down at the simulation happening, and this is a video of the inside, and you can see this is what I think a takeoff looks like for one of our runs. And so here we're comparing the traditional method of tying these down with the Qstraight method on two similar wheelchairs. And so what we can do is look at, for example, the forces that are applied to the wheelchair, the tension in those cables. The left, what you see here, measured in newtons, this is the traditional uh, method of tying things down. You can see the forces are much higher than what you get with the Qstraight. Um, just to give you, this number in newtons, this is probably around 900 newtons. That's 90 kilograms or around 200 pounds of force. So that's like someone standing, you saw that yellow strap running over those motor mounts on the wheelchair in the way that they're often in the way they're often secured. That's like someone standing, right? 200-pound person standing on the edge of that motor. That's how much force is being applied through those straps. So you can see that while you can do this with limited, with a reasonable amount of force, you can see that in some cases the forces do jump up depending on the types of motion and things that we get. Whereas with the Qstraight straps, we are at a much lower, a statistically significantly lower forces when you're applying with those. Um, another part of our project is to use data loggers to see what's happening during an actual flight. So we put these little battery powered data loggers. We recruit people that are flying with their wheelchairs, and we ask them to just zip tie these little data loggers to their wheelchairs. And it's essentially like a little AirTag, like an Apple AirTag type thing that measures the accelerations, and it can tell you whether the device was securely tied down or whether it was moving, or whether it was flipped on its side at some point while it was getting loaded or unloaded, that whole process. We can see what was happening. So far, we've got data from about 21 flights, and this is the type of data that we get from it. So you can see this is when the person handed over the device. This is loading. This is the actual flight here. So you can see this is where takeoff happens right here. The acceleration drops This is, really it increases as the plane is getting ready to fly, is getting ready to take off, and then I think this is where they would have braked to after landing, and unloading. So this is what a normal flight looks like. Everything I think this is quite a reasonable data set that looks like the wheelchair was treated quite well. Here's what you get when a wheelchair was not secured properly. So you can see in this case, we had here's takeoff, and then some point during the flight, the wheelchair actually flips over. So this tells me that this wheelchair was not put in place, and you can see for half of the flight, it flipped over on its side or on its back or something. And then when it was unloaded, you can see it was put back on its wheels again, and it's back where it was. So this line drops down here, meaning that some part of it, I'm not sure whether it flipped on its side or on its back, but it probably wasn't tied down at all in this case. So that's what we can quickly see, that how often these types of things are happening. We've done some passenger surveys. So we did a survey in collaboration with the Muscular Dystrophy Canada, just under 1,000 responses. 455 of those people had flew with wheelchairs or mobility scooters. The goal was just to understand what are all of the accessibility barriers to air travel that people would have experienced. Um, of the people that flew with a mobility device, majority had damage or had a delay, experienced a delay in having their devices returned, which is not surprising. This is what we expected to get. We've published those results now for our first paper. We did a follow-up study to try to dig a little bit deeper into some of the to see if passengers can tell us a little bit more about what happened to their wheelchair, and if there's any way we can help if we can get to understanding the root cause from the passenger perspective, and what was the impact on the passenger. And so we recruited people who had flown in the last 5 years out of a Canadian airport and had damage to their airport or damage or loss of their mobility device. We have 42 responses. This nothing surprising here, but 22% had major damage, which made their device unusable. Um, just highlighting a whole bunch, almost 30% were less likely to travel by air after that experience. So you can see the impact that this is having. And really the goal of this data is to allow us to bring it into training materials that could be used when we're talking with people that are involved in securing and managing and handling these devices. I think this type of data would be helpful to highlight how often the problems are occurring and the impact it can have on people, to help motivate those frontline workers to maybe change the way they're doing things.
Sorry,
Please.
can you go back to the previous
Yeah.
42 responses? Can you go back to the okay, 42 responses.
This
Okay.
one is a
Okay.
smaller,
Yeah.
this one's a fairly small data set.
Hmm.
So yeah, so definitely we have to be careful with the level of, how much we
Yes.
take from this
Yeah.
data. These are small
Mm.
samples.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, wait. Can you just go
Oh,
back?
sorry. Yep.
48, 42
Hmm,
responses,
hmm.
48 had substantial damage. Okay. That would be interesting to see in a bigger,
Yeah.
to see the big picture.
Yeah. To get more. Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a
Uh,
little bit of survey fatigue in this
mm,
population now.
yeah, I
There's
think
there's
so.
there's quite a few people
Mm,
who have been running studies in this space, and I think
mm.
people are getting a little tired of answering surveys on this.
Yeah, but because I think that the principle is that, the principle that we are using is that even one damage is way too much. And then, yes, and so what? And what do we do
Yeah, yeah,
to avoid that even one is way too much? At least from an advocate's perspective, this is what I think. Then I
absolutely.
leave to Caroline, who is much more expert than me from operations. Actually,
No,
she is the expert in operations. Yes. Yeah.
I'm just looking at
Mm-hmm.
maybe the fact that you've created videos on how to
Mm-hmm.
load. I
Mm-hmm.
think that is the information that should go out. What
I
type of
agree.
material should be used for strapping?
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, yeah, this week on LinkedIn, I saw one
Mm.
client really complained because the tie down was done by a string,
Oh,
Mm.
really?
a rope. Yes.
Yeah,
From my point,
I
I
agree.
said, so I think if I listen from you, the biggest issue is how do we teach the industry how to do the strapping,
Yeah,
specifically for wheelchairs, because we have strapping in the loading process whereby we talk about standard lashing.
I
I'm just
agree.
the tie down straps,
Mm.
example of tie down attachments on the floor. So one of the biggest issues
Mm.
I'm getting to know is that some of the wheelchairs do not even have tie down points.
that's right.
I agree.
So what do
And
we do?
yeah.
So we have that's Q Straint
I
has
have
that
to
solution.
interrupt you for a
Oh,
second because I have a meeting in
oh,
3 minutes.
sure.
So I let you with Caroline, but it's good that we are recording this one because in the afternoon we have a meeting, Caroline and I, and she raised a very good point. How we make sure that this. And of course, I look at Sonia as well, that these videos will be used for an educational purpose for our members as well. So
If I
I,
may, just maybe
yeah.
before you leave,
Mm-hmm,
Linda,
mm-hmm,
you will recall when the work started was about 2 years ago,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and the goal is really to develop it's technical guidelines that are mini standard. They're not standard yet.
Yeah.
So because there's no standard about tie
Mm,
down and all of that. So the goal is really to push to get those standard. The first step is doing all the research that Tlak and his team is doing to get those technical,
mm,
practical guidelines that those will be published. Then everybody can use them as they want. We're regulators. So,
mm-hmm.
and if they're not standard, we cannot regulate them.
I agree.
So, but they will
Yeah.
be public so people can use them. And then the work will get in eventually with Accessibility Standard Canada, who
Mm-hmm.
will develop a standard. I'm hoping we've been asking that for
Yep,
years for
yep.
them.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
we're hoping it's going to get there. But after that, then when it's a standard, it's accredited, then we can,
Sorry,
obviously
guys.
it's still a long process, but
Mm-hmm.
incorporated by reference, so it becomes part of our regulation. But it's a long, long process. And again,
Mm,
until we see the standard, what it is, etc.,
mm-hmm.
we cannot talk about, yeah, for sure it's going to be integrated. But the goal of that, it's education, getting
Yeah.
information out as soon as possible,
Yeah. Yeah.
and having the industry improve.
Yeah. Very
I'll
good.
I'll just
Thank
add.
you.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. I have
Thank
to
you,
go.
Linda.
Someone is waiting in front
Sure,
of
Okay,
sure.
thank
me.
you.
I'll see you later. Bye.
Thanks,
Thank
Linda.
you.
Thanks for
Bye
Bye.
joining.
bye. Bye 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 bye.
I'll just add to your comments, Sonia. I think you're right that there's one way that these results, the traditional standards approach is one way that this, we can develop the standard and then we can see training develop to enforce the standard and help guide people to use them. I think the faster way to get an impact here is to demonstrate that there's a big difference between different airlines and how seriously different airlines are taking these things.
Yeah.
Many airlines have already made big changes based on what's happened over the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
They have instituted their own rules because they see the the risk of bad publicity, right? All of a sudden, this is everywhere in the papers. Every time something happens, it gets put in the papers. And there's we're seeing fast movement. People are not waiting for standards. They are
Oh,
actually
no,
moving.
and that's okay.
Yeah,
And this is why I'm saying like this
yeah,
information as it goes out and as it gets
yeah.
into technical guidance, it's very good because people can take them, improve their
Yes,
practice.
yes, yes.
I'm a regulator. I cannot do anything.
Oh,
The
I
only thing I
understand. I
can do
understand.
is to integrate by reference. So
Yeah.
it may be regulated at some point, but for us, it's a slow process.
I
But
understand.
definitely for the industry, whatever they can improve and take, and that's the purpose. Like that's why I like those technical guidance, because they're out faster.
Yes.
Their information, it's not
Mm-hmm.
mandatory, but people can see the value and
They
they
know
can
what to do to make
adapt
it
or
better. Yeah.
move it, like change it a little bit and make it work. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. I can just touch on the last couple of things that we're doing here, and then we can continue to discuss. We've also done a staff survey with, with the handlers, the people that manage baggage. So, the interesting thing here
Mm-hmm.
is that there's some companies, some airlines that have fully separated baggage handling from wheelchair handling. So there's a special
Really?
team. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the leaders in this space are taking this very seriously. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to name them right now, but they are
Okay.
the people we talk to for our research. We say we'll keep everyone anonymous, but
Okay.
there are some organizations that have built teams that focus so they have trained people when they're handling wheelchairs. And I think that is one of the better approaches, so that in a minute I'll show you the results of some of our staff surveys. People don't have enough hands-on experience with wheelchairs. This is one of the challenges, and especially in places like Canada, where we have more remote airports where they may not get many wheelchairs. They don't have, once their wheelchair shows up, they've never actually done this before. And, so there's something we have to be able to do with that. So just to back up, I can go through there's two parts to the staff survey that we've done. The first part is to just understand broadly from their past experience, what do people think about wheelchair damage and loss, and how their role, like what are the challenges, the barriers that they face to keeping these devices safe. And in part two, we actually asked them to fill in part two after having uh, dealt with a wheelchair. So they handle a wheelchair. They either they either secure one within, they load one or they unload one, and then answer this survey. And we want to understand what were the types of barriers that they faced with that particular task. This survey is ongoing right now. We only have 13 responses for part one and 17 for part two, but the lack of hands-on training, the lack of hands-on training is one of the big challenges that we're hearing about. Communication does not, a lot of these, there are requirements that people fill in all this information before they fly when they're booking their tickets, but that information does not always make it to the person when they need it. That's very clear. There's a breakdown in communication. Time constraints. I know Sonia and I have talked about this a lot. If you imagine the worst case scenario of having a wheelchair, so the person is going to stay in their wheelchair until they're about to board. So they're at the boarding level, but that wheelchair now has to be brought down to the loading level, right? The ground level. So now someone has to take that wheelchair and push it. They have to disconnect the battery, and now they have to push it to an elevator, go down, and then bring it back over to the aircraft. And depending on where you are in the airport and where the closest elevator is, that can be a long, long time. And it's pushing this heavy thing that is hard to push. I don't think there's so that, I think that's a huge part of this challenge. And I know that this is not a recommendation that will probably find its way in there, but we have to make the recommendation that we should recommend that we allow for more time. If there's a wheelchair that has to be stowed, part of the challenge is that people do not have time to do it within from the 30 minutes that they have to leave the gate, from the time that the person gets out of their wheelchair to the point when the plane needs to be loaded. There is not enough time. And I would love to understand, there are other things that we have flexibility in the system. For example, if it's icy out, to de-ice a plane before it takes off, we make different allowances for time when it's necessary. And I think this is one of the things where is there any way we could allow for more slack in the system when there's someone who's booked a flight with a wheelchair, to allow them to board earlier than the 30 minutes or whatever it is.
Usually it is the process, Tilak. It's usually the process whereby, especially when you have a passenger with a very heavy wheelchair,
Yeah.
they're allowed to board fast because they know it takes.
Yes.
In fact, we are lucky in Canada that we have elevators. Some
Yes.
places in the world, there are no even elevators.
That's right.
And
That's
you
right.
need to seat the passenger and then move the equipment down. So it
Yes.
needs time. So
So,
usually they're boarded fast.
yeah.
But again, it varies from one situation to another.
Yeah. Yeah. So that will be one of our recommendations, I think. The other thing that we have yet to test, but we've heard good things about this device. So this is a tray that solves some of the problems that I was describing with getting a wheelchair onto the belt loader. It prevents, so the way this would work is you would load the wheelchair onto the tray, and then the tray is what gets moved around after that. And it could be placed, it has handles and makes it easier to manage. But the tray itself allows you to place the tray onto the belt loader, and it can now be moved more securely up the belt loader so someone isn't pushing it. I think one of the innovations that someone needs to think about, and I've been talking with this company that makes this tray, is to add casters on this tray. Because you could imagine then having it sort of becomes like a dolly that the wheelchair goes onto, and then you can roll this tray wherever it needs to go in, to get to the elevator and down and over. You're not fighting the wheelchair to push it. I think this could make something like that. It would be a small change to a product like this that already exists.
There is more and more company using tree, maybe not this one,
Yeah.
and there is a different company also looking at a tree.
Yeah.
Some of them they
Do they
have
have
some
wheels? Has anyone put wheels on? Do you know?
not that I'm aware of.
Yeah. Because
No,
if
I
you had
don't think I have seen wheels
if
yet.
the challenge you have is adding the tray, what happens is it makes it harder it makes the wheelchair a little bit taller, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so then now the door, the
Yep,
types of
to squeeze in
aircraft
the
that you
door, it's
need to fit
difficult.
into, you narrow a little bit more the types of wheelchairs you can fit in certain
Yeah.
aircraft. But if you had wheels that could, if the tray is thin, and if you had wheels that retract, if you can put them up, if the wheels can be engaged and then disengaged,
Mm-hmm.
I think there could be a big shift, and people could even load their own wheelchair, put netting over it. These products come with different netting types that you can put over it. I think the users could feel more confident seeing their own wheelchair packaged nicely with protection and then see it rolled away. I think they might feel better about that whole process. So
The
we're gonna,
the issue is it compatible to the aircraft floor? Because
yes,
that's the other thing.
yes.
Is it a tray that is just for loading? And
It's
once you
it's
finish loading, you remove it from the tray to anchor it down.
No, you anchor this then gets anchored to the floor of the aircraft.
Ah, okay.
Instead of anchoring the wheelchair, you anchor the
Mm-hmm.
tray. So it has the same L track. It has straps built into it, which are designed to then snap into the L track in the cargo space. Yeah. So this seems like Air Canada is one of the companies that is starting to use these, and it looks like a really good option. We haven't yet seen it in use,
Mm-hmm.
but we're planning to do another visit at Pearson to watch a wheelchair get loaded and unloaded and secured with this device, and we'll
Does it
see.
have the maximum weight that you can load on that tray? Because I'm also looking at, especially when it's a tied down, there is the thing of the force, the calculation of the defined forces.
Yeah. You mean can this tray take that level of force? You mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
The
yeah, yeah.
weight.
Yeah, it's designed for that purpose. Yeah, it's
Uh,
designed for power wheelchairs. The company designed it specifically to allow power wheelchairs to be secured. And I think it has all of the certifications it needs. Uh, I can't remember the name. Yeah, I can't remember what the exact certification is for airworthiness, but it has all of those and it's in use now with certain airlines. Yeah. Um, So I'll just finish up. The last thing we're doing is trying to bring together this community of people that are concerned with this problem, which includes the users, end users that use wheelchairs and have experienced damage, as well as Sonia and CTA and all the airlines that we could. We ran meeting in September 11th that Sonia was one of our presenters. We had a total of I think 18 presenters come that day, and I felt that we had uh, Air Canada, WestJet, Jazz, um, the Greater Toronto Airport Authority was there, the Ottawa International Airport people were there. And I thought it was a Boeing, someone from Boeing joined us as well. I think we had a lot of really good discussion around the problem. The morning session was we looked at the barriers in general to accessibility with air travel, and in the afternoon we focused specifically on damage to mobility devices. It was meant to I presented many of the results I'm presenting to you now there, and it was an opportunity to get feedback from some of the airlines to see how they feel about some of the recommendations that we will be making. But overall, I felt like it was a very engaging experience. We're planning to run another meeting like this. Sorry, those are all the groups that were there. I forgot to mention Perimeter Aviation, which is the airline in Canada that deals with more remote areas in Northern Ontario and other places in more remote areas. And they really, the speaker from that organization really highlighted the biggest challenges that we have is some of these really remote airports where there's maybe a shack there and it's a gravel airport. They have very little infrastructure there, and finding a way to make passengers with wheelchairs, finding a way to make the whole process more accessible for them in those places is the biggest challenge, clearly. But we are planning to run another conference in 2027. This will be closer to the end of the project. We'll have our finalized, hopefully, our recommendations at that point, and we're looking for feedback. We'll be looking for final kind of comments on what we'll be recommending at that point. So that's kind of the big picture of what we're doing. Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
So maybe if I can ask, so basically what we've narrowed down, the biggest issue is the loading. It's not even the size of the aircraft door,
It
because we still feel the size of the aircraft door. The minute you start tilting the
yes.
equipment,
Yeah.
then
So I think, yeah, so that's an interesting point. So I think we know that the door is a critical piece of this. So some wheelchairs will not fit and
mhm,
through certain doors. And I think one of the things that most airlines have done now is they've said, if you have to give the dimensions of your wheelchair, and if the dimensions are too big, then they will not let you fly with that
mhm,
on that aircraft. So it is, I think there is a potential to help to improve. That is one way of reducing the risk of damage by making it so
mhm,
you don't have to tilt the wheelchair, but it does also cut the ability for some people to fly, because there are only certain types of aircrafts that they could possibly take. And so I think we do need to look into talking more with the wheelchair manufacturers. This is where I've been fighting to get in touch with more of these people, but they seem to not want to get into this discussion for some reason,
mhm,
unfortunately. But understanding, is there a way to make wheelchairs that could be easier to collapse, or to come up with a standard that you could you could always collapse it to this size, have headrests and things, even if there are extra components on a wheelchair, have them all designed such that they could be, or at least make sure that the user is aware that if there's a way to collapse it to a given size, then it will be much easier for you to fly because you can fit into the largest range of aircraft. I think there's some work we can do with the wheelchair manufacturers to that
mhm.
respect. And Resna has some guidelines on those things that I think our recommendations will include. Yeah. but it
Okay.
still
But am I
seems.
right, Tilak, to
Oh yeah.
think that your study is really focused on the handling of the mobility aid, the strapping of it? Because the door, like you mentioned, Caroline, would be a great thing. I know
Mm-hmm.
that at the city we didn't mention it to a few manufacturers that,
Mm-hmm.
when you're looking at new conception, new
Mm-hmm.
perhaps if you can look at having those doors a little bit bigger, higher. We don't have, comment je peux dire? It's tricky because I understand from an engineering point of view, like they will need to rethink a lot of things, not only the door as
Mm-hmm.
they shift things around. But the study was not focused on the door because
It's
that's
fine.
really like the manufacturer, more his association, like yours, user of wheelchair association, people who are regulating those aircraft infrastructure. I think definitely that may eventually, but the thing is those type of aircraft, like when they order them, it's for like several years. So before they renew what they're doing with, it may take a while before we see bigger door. That's what
It
I'm
will
trying
take
to say
forever.
here.
I
Yes.
understand.
Exactly. And for what it's about the wheelchair and the association developing those wheelchair and the standard around the wheelchair, my understanding, and I might be wrong here, but my understanding from what I recall from different group of people with disability, why do I need to modify my chair? My chair is made, it's through a prescription often with different, and then there's occupational therapist, there's um designer, engineer thinking about like being able to receive those prescription and make the seat for them for their needs.
Mhm.
So this is where it's sensitive to have something to play with those chairs
It's a very
to fit. And
sensitive
sometimes people
topic.
with disability, they don't react necessarily well to that because it's already quite complex to have their own seat built for them exactly with the specificity. So those alternations may, not go as well with other changes to make it fit. So this is where it's sensitive, I think, and that might be
Very
where
sensitive.
Tilak, in your discussion with some manufacturer, they're they're not, it's more difficult to have those
They're not
discussions.
really interested in talking about it. Yeah, it was some I think it is sensitive, but I think I'm an engineer, so I always like to think about the problem from as many different directions as we
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
can. And
Mm-hmm.
is there a way that we can come to solutions that incorporate a number of, I understand we can't take away that critical function for someone that their wheelchair provides them, but is there a way to provide the same function with a headrest that also has a way to fold down? Is that possible? In some cases, yes, I'm sure in some cases, no. But I don't even think we've had that conversation really to understand what is possible and what's not. And
Mm-hmm.
a few inches makes the difference, right? Like that, like 1 or 2 inches of folding in one or two places could mean the difference between people being able to fly and not fly, out of a smaller regional airport where wide body aircraft are less likely to be, and you have to go with a narrow body aircraft, which tends to have the smaller door. The difference is they may have to otherwise take a train to get to a major city, to go to a major airport before they can fly anywhere, right? And I think I agree with you that it's a sensitive area, and
Mm-hmm.
but I think people also understand that it's worth looking into. I think that all of the people with lived experience, and by the way, I'm the father of my son uses a wheelchair, and like I
Mm-hmm.
would, if I was given the choice when I'm purchasing the wheel, these are very expensive pieces of equipment.
Of
um,
course.
if I was given a choice, like, look, this is gonna cost a little more, or you're gonna gain if you pay a little bit more for this, you have the ability to fold this, and it will fit in 60% of aircraft. If I knew that versus if you go with this one, it only fits in 30% of aircraft. If I knew that, it would mean something to me, and I would make a decision based on how much I think our family needs to fly somewhere, you know?
Actually, there is an app that United Airlines have created, which is very good, whereby once you start booking your tickets, it allows you to put the weight, the height, the width. Then it tells you which aircraft your wheelchair is going to fit. However, I know passengers using the wheelchairs. At times, that information is it's good information, but it doesn't come out well because basically it's you're denying me the right to travel.
Yeah.
And this is where now the conversation starts coming in of can I tilt the wheelchair a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah. So we've also thought about
Mm-hmm.
is there a way, and this is, we haven't been able to talk with the wheelchair manufacturers about this, but
Mm.
imagine that tray that we're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
if it included a back support or a side support that had foam on it, so that it was designed to carefully support the wheelchair as you're tilting it. Is there some way that you could load a wheelchair safely? Like, could we design the wheelchair such that it could be rotated on its side if it has the appropriate structure around it to design around to protect the wheelchair? That's something that we also haven't had a chance to talk about, but yeah, that is a good question.
I think that's long term. So let's work on, we can have short-term goals, ensure that we load them correctly.
Yeah.
I don't know how many airlines are like willing to invest on the tray. It would really help.
Yeah.
So work on the strapping of the
Yep.
of,
That's
the
right.
wheelchair and ensuring that it is done correctly.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So our recommendations will have short term, the things that can immediately be put in place that should make the risks, should reduce the risks. But then also think about longer term design related things. The next generation of aircraft and next generation of wheelchairs, how could they be designed to facilitate air travel? Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So will you be sharing with us a paper on the study final
Yeah. Well, it's
recommendation?
still, we still have 2 years before we're
Ah, okay.
done this. So yeah, we will. We're putting out, as I mentioned, there's one paper that we've already published, but there will be more work as we gather these results. We'll be sharing them. Yeah.
Would you
Do we
be
have
able
a
to send us the link of this paper
The
already
paper, yeah, I can put
published?
it in the chat right now. Yeah.
Sorry, Caroline, I think you may have had the same question.
yes, same question.
Sure.
I
Yeah.
was just wondering, do we have contacts to the manufacturers, especially within Canada? Mobility aid manufacturers, do you have contacts?
So I have not gotten people to be very responsive. So I have contacts,
Mm-hmm.
but so the people that are very responsive are the
Mm-hmm.
vendors. So there's the manufacturer, but a wheelchair user goes to the vendor that takes products from different manufacturers and puts them together to make the chair. So
Mm-hmm.
Motion is one of the larger vendors in Canada, and we are in touch with them, and they're very supportive of this project, and they presented at our conference. So we are in good contact with them and have a good relationship with them, but they've tried to put us in contact with some of the manufacturers, but the manufacturers were having trouble um, building a relationship with them, unfortunately. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So in case of any further question, maybe I'll write to you.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the study. Share with us the link, then
I'm
yes.
gonna get you the link to the paper right now. Yeah, here we go. Actually, why don't I dig it? It'll take me a minute, so I can email it to you after. Here, I'll email you a PDF of the paper right after.
Okay. So I will send you my email address in
Sure.
chat.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I'll send that right after. Right after.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining.
I can't wait for this to be a success. It should be. Honestly, everyone has right to travel.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Good.
It was
Any,
nice meeting you, and thank you, Tilak, for the presentation. It
Yeah,
was good.
pleasure. Thank
anytime,
you. Thank you.
anytime.
Very nice. Thank you. Bye,
Take
Tilak.
care.
Thank
Okay,
you.
bye.
Bye-bye.